know where you are. So, get on the formula.
This is Appetite for Distortion.
Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode number 387. My name is Brando. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. David Fishof. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well and excited to be number 387.
I think so, since that you're on with me. And before I lose it, I wish you were a guest earlier. It's something that it wasn't on my GNR radar. I don't know if you could tell that this podcast is a lot about Guns N' Roses.
Well, now we got, I'm excited. I announced yesterday Richie Fortis.
Yes, I shared. I saw that on Instagram. I reposted that, or whatever the kids are calling it. But I want to give a shout out to a listener, Mary Lynn, who recommended. Have you ever interviewed David Fishof? And because I was asking for guests for the new year, and he's like, of rock and roll fans. She said, of rock and roll fantasy camp. It seems like he'd be a great guest, and now has a new book out to talk about. So not just the book, we're going to talk about the documentary, Rock Camp, the movie. But before we even get to that, you have had your career is something that I am so amazed by, and what made the documentary so fun to watch. It's on, if you haven't seen it yet, hit pause, go watch it first. It's on Amazon, it's on YouTube, it's on a lot of other streaming services.
It's free. It's free on Amazon Prime now.
Yeah, I chose, because I like staying on my computer, I chose YouTube, but still, I enjoyed it regardless. So you kind of had the beginnings of the marvelous Ms. Maisel, in a way, of the Catskills, of that scene, right? Of booking guests and comedians. Wow. So,
and I'm about to announce it. I'm going to do a comedy fantasy camp with Adam and another big name, which once we confirm it tomorrow, I'll announce it. But I started in the Catskills, and my brother was the musician. I tried to be a musician, right? Because that was the only way you could get women. And that's why, Brett Michaels, Joe Walsh, they all admitted it, So, but I wanted to be a musician. I was terrible. But I was booking all the comedians up in the Catskills, from Freddie Roman, Henny Youngman, Jack Carter, David Brenner, you name it. And so I'm going to live my dream out finally after 25 years of continuing to do rock and roll fantasy camp. I'm going to try to do a comedy fantasy camp.
Oh, that's brilliant. And you mentioned Adam Carolla. I know that because it's cool. You just did Adam Carolla's show, and then you're doing this fun little Guns N' Roses themed podcast. But, I put myself down. You're probably used to that as far as my Jewish nature. We
all do.
It's part of our shtick. It is what I mean. It's not even a shtick. It's a therapy thing that I'm trying to work out. But
my wife says to me the other day, anxiety. You have so much anxiety. I said, Karen, anxiety is a Jewish thing. My father's a Holocaust survivor. Can you imagine? That's where I got it from him. Or my mother. From Berlin, Germany. But it's okay. Anxiety, we want perfection. So that's why we're anxious. We like to do good things for people and good things in business. So I think anxiety, as long as you keep it under control, it's okay. But that definitely it's our heritage.
And that's what spoke to me. And I'm purposely wearing my Guns and Moses shirt for you today.
Oh yeah, I just saw it in Israel. I just got back from Israel. It was great.
My brother, because there's a shout out to the cover band. David Rose is the lead singer there. And one of my brothers got it on Birthright when he went to Israel. He brought it home for me. He got it for me. So, but that spoke to me, and especially at the beginning, that I don't know who coined the phrase, but talking about your career, that you were the one who brought the yarmulke to the next level. So obviously with rock and roll and the Jewish humor, it really spoke to me, that documentary.
I have to give you a great story for your fans that you will love. So I buy a ticket to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I'm sitting next to Slash years ago. And I went over to him and I said, hey, Slash, would you do my rock and roll fantasy camp? And here's my card. And next day he called me and he says, tell me about it. Seems intriguing. I explained to him what it is. And he did it. He came to Vegas. I asked him to come for a few hours, and he ended up staying for 12 hours. He worked so hard. I got to tell you what, he was amazing. He jammed with every band for an hour. And,
Wow.
he could, I said, just come and do 1 or 2 songs. And he just couldn't stop playing. And he even said to me later, it was the hardest thing ever to do. But I said to him afterwards, I said, I want to call my camp Slash's Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. I said, your name, it could make it just amazing. And I said, that was my idea. And I said, can we go have lunch and meet for lunch one day? So he calls me back and he says, meet me at the Cantor's Deli on Fairfax.
Mhm.
Now, I said to him, I eat kosher, but I know Cantor's, but we can go anywhere somewhere else. He said, no, let's go to Cantor's. So I realized when I came to Cantor's, I met him in the back room. He said, meet my best friend, Mark Cantor.
Right.
And he said to me, Mark fed the entire band when we were at Fairfax High School, and he's my best buddy. And they're so close to this day. And Mark wrote a great book on the band. And I always bring my campers to him and let Mark tell the story. And it turns out my daughter married his cousin.
Okay.
So we're in the family. And Mark's a fabulous guy. But I want to tell you about Slash, the greatest. And it's been hard to get him to come back, and because he's busy, he got so busy now. And but the fact that the band goes to Israel, the fact that they're not scared of, they're going this summer, July 15th, they're going to be in Israel. And you got to give them credit, where so many artists have been afraid to go because of Roger Waters, and is causing them aggravation. The Stones have gone, McCartney goes, but Guns N' Roses, they go. And I have to tell you, I've had a lot of the members of the band, whether it was Steven Adler or Matt Sorum, Duff McKagan did my TV show, all terrific people. And now I'm really excited because I used Richie Fortis to do a masterclass, and he sold out both of them during the COVID. We did them on Zoom, and he was such an amazing person that so I contacted him, and he said he's in rehearsals for Guns N' Roses during the month of May. I said, anytime you can make it. He says, well, we're not going to start for 1 o'clock, so I'll come in the morning. So another gentleman, just so you know. And I say that because, people's identification of these rock stars is just so different of who they really are deep inside, and they come across a certain way. But, rock camp, as you saw in the movie, they're really amazing people.
It's not so much yes, you're right, because I've been lucky enough to have Richard Fortis and Mark Cantor both on the podcast. And I know Mark Cantor's not a rock star, but I've been lucky to have some of the guests that you've had on, like Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper was really nice people. Dave Mustaine, really nice person.
Great guy.
But what I found really interesting about the camp, because a lot of and I'm so glad you made the Simpson references, because I'm a huge Simpsons fan. I could have easily done a Simpsons podcast as well. But sometimes, like at the beginning, I'm watching the early news stories about the rock camp, and like when Jay Leno made the joke, it's a lot of money. But it's not about that. It's not about maybe someone privileged and they have. I'm not Howard Stern. I don't make a lot of money. I personally couldn't. Hopefully one day
you can. People pay it off over 12 months. They also, it's just as costly today as it is to go on a cruise. And
sure.
You go to those festivals, and I see how expensive they are. Rock camp is not. I give you more of it. I put you on, on stage with these people, and while I know the cost, people think the cost is high comparatively to what's out there on a vacation. It's not, and but I'm not here to defend the cost of rock camp, because it's
expensive. And I have a point to that as well, because you're right. I think the investment is different than going on a vacation. That's something there was one couple that said, we don't go on vacations, we come here. And the reason being, and I'll credit another listener because she phrased it so well. Her daughter went to a fantasy camp 15 years ago. She wasn't sure which year. But my Cat McLeod said it helped her self-esteem, and she started performing live with full confidence thanks to this amazing school and amazing and brilliant endeavor. They had to come up with an original song at the end of the week, and it was such an invaluable experience. So it's the experience that the person has. And what really blew me away was not just the person, but the families that were included in the documentary.
The husbands, first of all, the husbands come home. The wives tell me my husband doesn't have road rage anymore. Okay, here's the best way to explain Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. first of all, with COVID, a lot of new people picked up guitars. A lot of people are musicians. They play in their houses, never play with bands. Those are the type of people that we attract. But we also get our majority of our people went to high school, college, had a band, and they had no choice, but they had to go take a real job. And they want to really be a musician and do what they love. And they had to take the real job and not go for it, like these musicians who did go for it. Joe Perry said it best at a camp. He said somebody asked him, well, we were doing a Q&A, and Joe asked somebody, what do you do for a living? And the guy says, I'm a lawyer. And on weekends, I play guitar in my band. And he says, you're full of shit. He says, you're a guitar player first, and you do that legal bullshit to pay for your guitars. And the guy said, yeah, that's me. And my brother's a rabbi in Boca Raton. And I called him up right afterwards. My brother's the drummer, and he's the one who got me into all these bands. And he said to me, he said, I'd give up anything just to be a full-time drummer. So a musician's a musician, and they're full-time, and they want to do it full-time. So Rock Camp has really come to the answer for them to see what their lives, could have been, would have been, or can be. And when I say can be, many of these people are now joining tribute bands, they're writing new songs, they're recording albums, and they're enjoying the success of music in later years.
And it's just from the best teachers in the world, the people they grew up, what got them into music, the reason why they are there.
That day Slash was there, I can't tell you how many people's lives he changed that day. I know personally one lady, her pictures on USA Today jamming with Slash. And she comes back to her job at Wall Street, and the boss calls her into the office and wants to fire her because she took 2 personal days, and there were sick days. And the guy said, you were sick? You were on the cover of USA Today with Slash. She turned around, she says, thank you very much. You can fire me. I'm quitting Wall Street. Today, she's a music manager, and she has 2 kids, and she got a family, and every year I get a news card from her, and she works for a music manager company. There was another young lady who also was at camp, and she got to jam with him, and she was 15 years old. And today she's a full-time musician, and just to be in the presence of Slash, and he showed us some chords and everything. And he was unbelievable. The patience that he has, and I would do anything to get him to come back. And I'm hoping one day.
Patience, pun intended, I'm sure.
Yeah, but he really showed, he showed people, and he gave of himself, and he loves to jam. How many shows did I do over the years? I did a Grand Funk show at the Greek Theater and this Slash. I did a Ringo show. I mean, he showed up everywhere to jam with people. He just loves playing.
I'm wondering if you could put it into words when somebody like Slash, like, yeah, he loves jamming. Even when he's not touring, he's always doing something, but not all musicians are like that. No. To get their time, I'm not even talking about what price tag they come with, just their time out. They're doing on the road. They just want to be with their family. But as somebody who I guess book guests on this podcast, which could be a challenge, but to get these people, like, is it because you are David Fishof and you've been doing this for so long that they're like, let me teach a bunch of, I don't want amateurs is too strong, but just like, why would they spend their time doing that?
So I approached Jeff Beck, and I asked him when he came to camp, and I really thanked him for coming. And I said, there's no question. I don't tell you, he's the greatest guitar player. And if you ask Jimmy Page, if you ask Eric Clapton, they'll both tell you that he's the best.
They've said it.
I asked him why did you decide to do my camp? After he was there, I had him, and he went through the experience. He said, I wanted to give back. I felt it was a safe place that I could play with fellow musicians and give back. And because the business has been really good to me. Nancy Wilson, she said to me after she did camp, she said, with your camp, it's while we try to make it in this business, and then once we make it, we become, it becomes about lawyers, agents, managers, and we finally made it. He says, your camp is pure music. So, it reminds them what it was like when it first started. And I think so, yes, I can get them there initially, but Nancy's been back 4 times. Joe Perry's been back 4 times. Roger Daltrey's done it 8 times. So once they do it, they come back because they get something from it. They realize that giving back. It's a great way to give back to people.
That was the sense I got from the documentary. I forgot who was that said basically what you're saying is that it's kind of going back to their roots and being there for the love of the music. And I think
Right.
that's really cool to see not just the people going to the camp, they're getting a lot out of it, but
Oh,
the
so much.
counselors, the rock stars. So it's a win-win all the
It's a
way around.
win-win. I wouldn't be around this year. You know, the problem with the business is unlike a concert where you can keep extending the fence or a festival or play bigger arenas, I'm only limited to take in 12 bass players, 12 drummers, you know?
Ah,
So, you know, it's not one of the greatest of businesses, but I have to tell you that in the end, you get so much gratification from changing these people's lives. And that, you know, you get some, every day I get an email thanking me. So, and, oh, David, I'm doing this and my band's opening for this. And, you know, my favorite story was, I was in New York about 4 years ago and a guy stops me on the street and he says, Mr. Fishof. I said, yeah, what's going on? He says, you wouldn't believe it. I just returned from Moscow with my band and we opened for Aerosmith. So what do you mean you opened for Aerosmith? He said, well, at the last camp 6 months ago, I met Joe Perry's manager, was with him, and I contacted her afterwards and said, our lead singer lives in Moscow. And we have a new album out, and could we be the opening act? And she said, well, send me the CD. And he sends the CD, and she said, and she goes to Joe and asked Joe. And Joe said, where did I meet this guy? I met him at Rock Camp. Let him open the show. He said, I was on stage in front of 50,000 people, and all because of Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. And while it's something I never promise anybody,
sure.
the contacts people make at camp is really incredible.
Really is a fantasy in so many ways. And I would be remiss if I don't mention this, that was such a surprising yet powerful and important thing in the documentary was the parents that went there that had special needs kids that couldn't communicate or had some sort of learning disability. And wow, it was like a therapy camp in a way. So is there a certain story that sticks out in your mind? Because
Well,
the transformation with some of these kids is just wow. That wouldn't happen without the
and
camp.
the adult transformation. I'll tell you an interesting story about that. But we could have done 1,000 campers. Everyone's got a story. You know,
Yeah.
these people, you know, with the director, Doug Blush, who did a fabulous job on the film. You know, Doug Blush also did 20 Feet from Stardom. He's produced some great and directed some great documentaries. But you know, so there's everyone has a great story. And that particular story, and I know I'll add this to it, is I recently got a call from a woman who said to me, I saw the film and I want to tell you that that couple, what they did to their son and through music and his dreams, and now the young man is attending UCLA, plays keyboards.
Wow.
My husband wouldn't do the work. And our daughter is in a home today. And so what she really was telling me was that the work that Scott and his wife did to, you know, parents can put in so much love and
Yeah.
they did it through the music to give their son a life. And some people don't work on it, and, you know, and so that to me was touching. But well, yeah, one of my favorite stories I love to share is I had a woman come who was my guest from the Susan Komen Foundation, and she was a breast cancer survivor, and she came to a camp with Meatloaf. And when she left camp, she came back and she wrote a book called Rocking in the Pink, and about her experience at Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. And then I asked her to come in for an interview, and the interviewer said to her, so when you left Rock Camp, you spent 4 days, Meatloaf and Roger Daltrey, and then you had to go back to your regular job. You know, how was it then on Monday morning? And she said, you know what happened? I decided after going to Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp that I was going to live an authentic life, just like these rock stars. I was going to, you know, and I'm never going to write another brief again. I'm not going to do any more law, and I'm going to become a writer. And she has now changed her name to Lauren Rowe because of the other book she wrote. And she's written 14 bestseller fictions that sell #1 on Amazon. So I think what people walk away with Rock Camp is life lessons, and they learn a lot from these rock stars. And I wrote a book 10 years ago called Rock Your Business because I wanted to share all the information that I learned over these years from people like Aerosmith, from Gene Simmons, from the Who, you know, the Beatles. You know, 50 years ago, these bands are making more money now, social media, music, and commercials and touring. the Rolling Stones, and companies can learn a lot from these rockers. They
Yeah.
are very smart, and Kodak could learn lessons. And so many of these companies that are no longer around 50 years later, these brands are Guns N' Roses. They're stronger than ever. So there's a lot you can learn from the rock and roll stars.
That is true, and that's something that I like doing in my interviews or when I read an autobiography. I want to see it's not just about the drug, sex, and rock and roll. It's like what life lesson can I? Because they're so worldly. They've been everywhere. They've
They're so worldly.
experienced, yeah.
Being around Ringo Starr for 15 years, and how smart he is, and all these musicians, because they've experienced traveling the world, meeting the right people, meeting the best people. So the smart ones, Mick Jagger went to London School of Economics. I mean, he's a genius. I mean, Gene Simmons, he's another one that incredible. Kiss is just they're so successful, and they keep going on their last tour, and they're going to do 100 more dates. And they announced that. But even Guns N' Roses, the business acumen of some of these people is really fabulous, and you can learn a lot.
There's no way you foresaw this, because I didn't know that this all started with Ringo's all-star band that you put together at first. Like, you were the person that convinced him to go on the road. And I happened to finally have caught the show. I think it was the year before COVID. And I was like, I should have been seeing this every year. Brilliant. But you localized that. And
I did it. I did it because I was, prior to doing that, I did a lot of package tours in my early career. I did Happy Together, which is still touring. I did Dirty Dancing's live tour. I did American Gladiators. I put that in the arenas. And my idea was to put an all-star band around Ringo. And the president of Pepsi was so happy with what I did with Dirty Dancing, because they sponsored that. And he said, "What's your next idea?" And so I told him I have this idea of Ringo and the All-Star Band, and he says, "I'll back you." And so I went over to England, and it took me 6 months to get a meeting with Ringo. I finally got the meeting, and I walk in and share my idea, and he says, "Oh, I was thinking the same thing." Together, we put this amazing band together, and there was nothing like that first tour. And you can see that funny joke that they played on me. I'll save it for the people to see the movie.
I fell for it until the reveal at the end. So, okay.
Yeah, and it was great to, and I was around these amazing musicians, and all the time I just kept saying, wow, if I could give this to a fan, and what they would just have the most. I was blown away. It was just me, Ringo, and the band traveling, and just watching how creative and how much fun they were, and whether it was writing a song, it was just amazing. And that's how I created the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. And then, and it allows me not to have to tour every night. Although I'm in Nashville today because I have a women's camp starting tomorrow with Winona Judd and Lizzie Hale.
Awesome.
I only travel when I have to go to a camp.
Why aren't you, or perhaps it was an oversight on my part, why aren't you in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
No, I don't want. I tell you, I didn't want to be in the movie. I got to tell you, one thing I learned from Ringo was the best lesson. When it came, I used to go to him and say, "Hi, this interview, they want to talk to you." He said, "No, give it to Joe, give it to Nils." He always pushed all the musicians. He never wanted it for himself. He's a gentleman who just wants to be in a band, and that's what he loves. And I'm the same way. I did not want to be in that doc. After the second year that they were putting it together, everyone kept saying, "You have to." Jeff Rowe, the producer, "You got to be in it." I said, "I don't want to be in it. I want to push everybody. I wanted the camper stories. I want the rocker stories." And they kept saying, "No, you need to do it." And, so I agreed to do it on a few conditions. It was important for me to tell my story that I'm a Holocaust survivor son. My dad survived the Auschwitz and Buchenwald, and he was a cantor. I wanted to tell people I was Orthodox Jewish, and I wanted to share the stuff that was important to me. I'm not a rock and roller, but I didn't want to be in it. I did it, and thank God, I'm glad I did it. But for me, it's always been about being the guy behind the scenes and pushing the talent forward, and that's what makes me fun. I don't want to be on that stage.
So what would go, let's just say you went to, let's just not call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Let's call it like the Baseball Hall of Fame. Off the air, you were talking about your friend Lou Piniella, and I know you're a sports guy as well. I use this analogy, a lot of sports analogies I use with music. Like if you get to the elected to the Hall of Fame, you get to pick what hat you're going to wear. Like
Yeah,
what hat would you wear? Like would it be
it's so funny.
fantasy camp?
I don't think that, I think the Baseball Hall of Fame is much more, to me, real than Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think that
Okay,
I'm
okay,
not
yeah.
I'm not, I think the Hall of Fame is great. And a lot of people, I had a camper sent me an email, a rock star. I asked him to do camp. He said, "Oh, I'm a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame." I said, "It means absolutely nothing. It won't sell anything more because you remember the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame." Because, I'm the Monkees. My biggest question people ask me on all my tours, my movie tour, as promoting the movies, why aren't the Monkees in the Hall of Fame? So, while some people think it's rigged and it's not even a fan favorite. Judas Priest just got in. I mean, they just got in this year. I mean, how many people aren't in and should be in? But it's a personal favorite, and Jan Wenner, who he decides is going to get in, that's usually who gets in,
Mhm.
and who love Rolling Stone. But I want to tell you that baseball is real. It's real. That I think it's harder to get into the Baseball Hall of Fame
Okay.
because of the writers, but the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's good, it's fun. They do charitable stuff, so I think it's great. But I don't think it's as prestigious for I'll go in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Well, it was for like a lack of a better analogy, because let's just say your business card, because I introduced you as the
Yeah,
CEO and founder of the Rock and Roll
I
Fan
love that.
of the fantasy camp, excuse
Yeah,
me.
right.
But what would because you've done so much. Can
I
you
just
say
want
what
to
you're
be the
most
guy.
proud of? Like I guess
Uh,
that's my what question I'm looking
I'm
for.
most proud of my 8 grandchildren and 5 kids.
Okay.
But I'm most proud of really taking what I have, what I learned, and change people's lives, and one by one, and seeing these people grow, and that I was able to give it to them, give them this privilege, and I get thanked every day, quietly on an email or get a Facebook, David, thank you. My band's opening for this. I recorded this, and I feel great that I'm doing, in life, it's better to give than to receive, and you get more out of giving than receiving, and that's to me is fun. So I'm a real simple guy. So I drive a scooter.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I
I
thought you upgraded. It said you
yeah, I
upgraded.
upgraded. Yeah, I won't drive a Harley. That's too much.
Okay.
But I keep my life simple, and I like to follow some great rock stars. I learned that from Roger Daltrey. He's the most charitable man in rock and roll. He gives them himself. He has a great charity called Teenage Cancer Rock, Teenage Cancer, yeah, Teenage Cancer America, and he gives himself to build outlets at hospitals so teenagers can get their cancer treatments instead of taking their chemo with babies and with the old people. They have their own sections now in all these hospitals that he and the WHO have built. I think, and I see how simple he is, and how many hamburgers can you eat? So I think that simplicity is definitely a better way to live,
Yeah.
um, and because money doesn't really make you happy in the end. I know it can pay a lot of bills and things like that, but if you're happy within, then you're really happy.
That's why, again, I love the documentary, because it's just more than just watching your favorite rock stars. It's the lessons that we learned from you. It's the lessons that we learned from the campers. I
And
know
I'll tell you
yeah,
one other thing that I hope people can take away from the movie, that at any age, you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. You do not have to wait. Or like, for example, if you want to be an artist at 50 years old, if you want to create an iPad at 45, nothing should stop you from taking an original idea and going for it. These people, while they do it through music, I want people to be able to take their ideas and their apps and their any thoughts they have and be able to do it and not be afraid.
is there anything, because I highly recommend the movie. It's not just because you're here. I felt better. I will say this, watching it, we were talking about families before. I'm going to be a first-time dad in April, and
Oh,
just
wow.
and seeing just the connections, I'm like, yeah, wow, I would totally do that for my son. Like just seeing the passion with some dad's eyes again. So I took a lot out of the movie than just seeing Slash there and Steven Adler with all, all the buttons that I want pushed anyway, typically. But also with the book, Rock Camp and Oral History, anything that's maybe in that book that wasn't in the movie, or vice versa, or is it
Yeah,
just
there
a
were a lot
trip?
of stories. There were a lot of stories from campers, a lot of stories that didn't make the movie, a lot of stories about camp that I was able to share. Um, and I want to say that the Rock Camp book is came out of the Rock Camp Foundation. A bunch of campers got together and formed their foundation, and they sent two campers, two young teens to each of the rock camps because they wanted to give this privilege and to young people who could never afford it or get to it,
That's
and so
great.
they could change their lives. And so I donated, I wrote the book and then I donated all the proceeds to them and the book to them. And it's dedicated to the foundation. And I think people enjoy the book. It's motivating. I think the book will, share more stories and about the camp, but go check the movie out. It's free. It's on Amazon Prime. It's Rock Camp. It's on YouTube. And I think people from there, that's a great place to start and see what we're really about.
I feel like I went to camp just by watching it, as silly as
Right.
they may sound.
And I have
Yeah,
to say, I wanted people to see, not to be scared to go, because it's
yeah.
intimidating. You have Jeff Beck, and all of a sudden, a wife calls me up. My husband can't come. He's got a business meeting. His brother has cancer. His mother has cancer. His guitar has cancer. They throw that word around like, relax. Just come. These rock stars leave their egos at the door. They're here to help you, and that's what they are. They really are. They give so much of themselves. And who knows if I could have done this 50 years ago, but definitely doing it now. The rock star is just so much more, willing to give, willing to meet their people, willing to meet their fans, and share their wares.
That's awesome. Before I let you go, a couple of quick things, because you mentioned Jeff Beck a couple times, and of course, rest in peace. And you showed that his thumbprints is on the Rock Camp big logo. That's just so cool. Because you told a good Jeff Beck story earlier, but anything that you might want to say about Jeff during
Well, first
perhaps
of
another
all,
experience?
I thought it was great having Jeff Beck there, even though people were scared to play with him. But then they
Yeah.
all relaxed in. And then he said to me after he jammed with everybody, he said, "What are these bands doing?" And I said, "They're jamming at the MGM tonight in the lounge, and each band's going to go on." He showed up and he came to watch them. And he said to me, "I'd get up there and play with them. I just didn't want to intimidate, and the place would go a little nuts if I did that here." So but he sat and watched them all perform. Then the next morning, my phone rings. It's Jeff Beck. And he says to me, "What's going on today at your camp?" I said, "Brian Wilson, Beach Boy." "Oh, send the car over. I want to come see him." He sat in the back the entire time Brian Wilson did a performance and jammed with all the bands, to see that he was such a fan of music. And then him and Brian got together and they went on tour together.
Huh.
And that was just incredible to see what a human being is. And to his blessing, if you see everyone posted about him, I mean, it was unbelievable. Everyone posted just
Yeah.
what a gentleman he was. And so I thought that was great. And because he was sweet that one time. Then when every time I saw him at a show, or he said to me, he came and gave me a hug, and he said, "I love that thing. That was great." So yeah, and it was amazing. And again, what I love about the film, I think you'll enjoy, because you see a lot of rock documentaries, you interview a lot of people. You get to see the rock stars differently than you
Yeah.
see anywhere else. You see a humble Gene Simmons. You see a humble Paul Stanley. You see a humble Sammy Hagar. You see these people, how they get touched with other fellow musicians. And like I think Roger Daltrey said it best. He says, I just got lucky."
You're right. And I'll just ask, because you just mentioned just in that one breath, all the A-list stars you've had. Anyone that you haven't got, or that's on a wish list?
Well, it was so great to have Mick and Keith do The Simpsons. So that was very exciting.
Okay.
I guess, I have to say it's Paul McCartney. He's my all-time favorite, and I probably never get him. Eric Clapton. I reminisced with Eric Clapton in a coffee shop one day. I shared a story when we were on tour with Ringo. I had Ginger Baker at camp, and I had Jack Bruce and Jack Bruce came to camp, and I told him the story about when we were doing on tour with Ringo, and Ginger showed up in Colorado, where he was a fireman for a while. And he showed up and Ringo got on stage. He said, "Tonight we have 2% cream." So I said to Eric, I said, "I've had two of the cream members, I'll do anything to have you come to camp." So he smiled, and He said, maybe one day. So, Jimmy Page and these people, I'm hoping that the one day they'll say to me, you know what, I'll do it. And so you never, I never say never, because I'm getting more and more great stars now that the movie's out there.
You've created so many great memories and just, I think events that have happened. I don't put anything past you. So I expect it to happen. You made, you're being humble, which is part of our DNA, is the self-deprecating and humble.
During COVID, what was I going to do? We all suffered. I can't tell you how many bands thought they'd never perform again. People scared. And I came up with the idea to do master classes. And every night I had another master class, whether it was Six, the band, Scorpions, you name it, Roger Daltrey. And, most of them gave the money to charity, or they gave it to their bands. And after 160 classes, I would turn to the hostess, Britt Lightning, our musical director, and I'd say to her on the phone, I said, it was just amazing. First of all, it kept me alive during COVID. I was happy, exciting, getting new artists to come see what the brand is about.
Sure.
But I think what was most exciting was, if you looked at the common denominator, all these 160 classes, whether it was a manager, a record executive, it was all passion, and it was about the song. And I leave you with that, and I leave all your listeners. The one thing that keeps all these rock stars is the passion for their musician, for their music, for their instrument, and writing that hit song. I mean, that's what it's about, is writing music. And I think that's the two things I learned. It's about the song, and everyone had passion.
Well, as I mentioned, the documentary is great. Congratulations on that. Congratulations on the book. Congratulations on your life, basically, is what I'm trying
Being a
to
good
say.
father is probably, and if I can be a good husband, then I've won.
Well, thank you, David Fishof. I hope we get to do this again.
Good. I hope to meet you. Come by when I do a camp.
You know what? I think that's what I'm going to do. I told my wife he's going to be a rocker. I can't play an instrument. I'm going to teach him, and that's what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Congratulations. I'll leave you this. My father was a mohel.
Okay.
Don't forget.
Every time I hear Moyle, I just think of that Seinfeld episode. So I got
yeah. And he worked on tips,
We'll leave on that. So that does
Thank
it for this
you.
episode of Appetite for Distortion. When will you see the next one? In the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, you'll see it. I don't know if soon is the word.